repetition. Kamala Harris yesterday had one of these sort of Soviet confabs before the cameras with, seat fillers where she bloviates on about, in this case, voting rights.
Oh, yeah. Governor Pritzker was there. He was one of 3 governors and 5 mayors were invited, and that's when she made this comment.
Like I said, seat fillers. Yeah. There's a guy who takes up the entire side of the table in terms of seat fillers.
If you saw
Very
the video,
efficient.
he was at the end. He's at the end of the table, and he's just like, "This is so exciting." I showed you the video. It's pretty.
Yeah. And then he said to Kamala Harris, "Hey, tell Biden he's sitting in my chair, but also I'm going to need a bigger chair." Kamala Harris saying this about those Texas Democrat socialist state legislators in exile.
We had an extensive meeting. I had an extensive meeting yesterday with, I think, some of the most courageous elected leaders that we could know at this moment. I said it yesterday, and I'll say it again. They took bold, courageous action in line with the legacy of everyone from Frederick Douglass, who's over my right shoulder, when he fought for the right of black men to vote in America, to the legacy that includes all those women who marched down Pennsylvania Avenue for women's right to vote, to all of those folks who shed their blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge to make sure that we would, in 1965, pass the Voting Rights Act. And now we have in 2021, the Texas legislature, many of them, traveling to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and the follow-up question should have been, has anybody contacted Jasper Johns to do a representation so that could be hung on the wall in their tribute next to Frederick Douglass? Has President Biden decided whether or not he's going to give the Presidential Medal of Freedom to the members of the Texas State House Democrat delegation?
Yeah, they're heroic refugees of the left.
Does Kamala Harris say such asinine things because she is, has the depth of a cookie tray, or is there purpose to it? I think there's purpose to it, which brings to mind this most recent piece from Jon Gabriel over at AZCentral.com. Jon Gabriel, who's also the editor-in-chief at Ricochet.com, joins us. John, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So what's the purpose, do you think, or is there one, behind Kamala Harris comparing Texas state legislators to Frederick Douglass and the suffragettes, or Joe Biden saying this is what's going on in Texas is Jim Crow 2.0, just like what's going on in Georgia was Jim Crow 2.0? What's the purpose behind it?
It's just this constant stoking of hysteria. Nothing can be as simple as, you know what, we disagree with these voting rules in Texas. We should change it. We should compromise, whatever, because it's such a minor deal. And all this is Jim Crow. No, this is Jim Crow on steroids. No, this is the worst thing since the Civil War. It's just kind of constantly stoking this panic that Washington is really good at, and the Democrats are just swinging for the fences on this stuff. It's really nuts because when we do have something serious that hits us, like, I don't know, say a $28 trillion debt, that isn't mentioned. That's not a problem. Instead, it's these very small battles in one state out of 50 that's going to be the end of democracy as we know it. And we hear the end of democracy about 50 times a day out of Washington, and when they are there to represent us, we sent them there to proceed upon democracy and solve a problem or two. Instead, they're just screaming and yelling on social media.
The Chiron on CNN on the 7s is Democracy in Danger, the recurring segment they have. I mean, I read your piece, and so it got me sort of thinking too, but there's got to be a purpose behind it, right? And it seems to me, and this goes with what you mentioned as well, this turns people off. This, like, everything we disagree about is the end of democracy. It turns commonsensical people off. And I think that's part of the purpose. I think the hyperbole is intended to fuel the indoctrinated activist set and to turn off common sense people from politics so the activist set can have their way. I mean, if you're right, and my instinct is right, that this turns people off. Well, then they don't pay attention when your schools get taken over with critical race theory curriculum, for example.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and we've been seeing that repeatedly, just more and more in politics. It's all about emotion, and that's last summer's of quote unquote mostly peaceful protests. It's just the triumph of emotion over any kind of reason. It's fine to have emotion and be passionate about these issues you care about, unlike that with school choice. But there has to be reason, has to be placed in gear, or otherwise it's just like racing from one hysteria to the next. And that's how the Democrats want to govern, because that's what the progressive activists want to see from them. It's just this constant rage, this constant panic. And, we saw it all last year with coronavirus. Now we have hard data showing that drug overdoses shot through the roof. You have teen suicides way up, all these horrible things. But when you pointed that, this might happen if you shut down the world for a year, you were called a grandma killer. They didn't,
Right.
Logic was not going to penetrate their emotion.
Or if you don't take the vaccine, you're going to kill Kathleen Sebas's grandchildren. That's for sure.
Or she's going
Or
to kill
she's gonna-
yours. Or
yeah.
she's going to kill your
It's
grandparents or
such
something.
hyperbole, but
Right.
how where's the exit ramp to this craziness? How do you think this is going to end, if it ever
Yeah,
ends?
I think a lot of it is just going to be people burning out on it. And I think you're already seeing this, all last year. Average parents of every race and creed were called racist for, opposing this critical race theory, this 1619 Project Madness. But when parents are confronted, overlooking a Zoom lesson that their kids are sitting through and hearing their kids being told that white people are racist from, due to genetic reasons, basically, and they're bad people and they need to repent and reform to adjust to the new progressive order, parents are saying enough. And once again, there's parents of all colors saying, you people are crazy and you need to stop teaching this. And thankfully, state legislatures around the country are starting to take action on it, at least. But the parents are just realizing, hey, this is nuts. We have to stop. We have to get off this crazy carousel that the politicians are putting us on, and just stand up for our kids. And this needs to expand to just stand up for our communities. In Illinois, there's some terrible decisions being made, and it just takes the people to turn that emotion, instead of just screaming on social media, to give a call to their state rep and say, hey, we can't proceed in this direction. Please vote this other way. I'll remember you at election time.
Well, with the curriculum so focused on who's oppressed in this country, then we have real-world oppression that comes to the attention of those who hadn't been paying attention for, say, the last 60 years, for example, in Cuba. And it's been fascinating to witness the contortions from the left to avoid acknowledging that Cuba is a communist dictatorship, the same way they contorted themselves to avoid having to account for their rallying for Hugo Chavez in his early days in Venezuela, as before the catastrophe inevitably unfolded. And so we have a catastrophe here, and it's all about, being opposed to oppression. But this isn't about partisan fights in this country, John. We can't forget the partisan fights here. We're just standing for people's freedom and dignity. But of course, there's no acknowledgement as to why the Cuban people don't have freedom and dignity.
Right. And you have the Biden White House who have been welcoming people to just stream across the southern border. I live in Arizona, and we face this every day with crime coming up, with drugs coming up, and then just the people who are trying to escape a bad situation in Central America being left by coyotes out in the middle of the desert to die. They've been encouraging that nonstop, and now that we're dealing with a possible influx from Cuba, Biden's saying, hey, basically build a wall. I don't know if they plan on a seawall or what, but they're like, you are not going to be allowed in this country. You stay in your own countries. Don't come here. Apply for asylum while you stay there. It's just, the hypocrisy is absolutely amazing. They class Cuba as a completely different category, as people who don't deserve human rights, as you say.
Well, and it's not only Cuba, too, but Haiti, too. They said don't even bother coming here.
Right.
Well, they throw Haiti in because they need a cover for Cuba because, hey, you look, DeSantis is up for re-election next year. The last thing we need is more Cubans in Miami.
Yeah, yeah. I actually just saw him speak last night. I'm visiting Florida right now, and yeah, he brought that up and just like, hey, we're talking about human flourishing, we're talking about human freedom, and we want freedom for all people. And yeah, I don't think the press is going to sideline him on that because he's coming loaded for bear.
The only way that the Biden administration would support it is if it was like Mariel Boatlift Part 2, where you just allowed the dictators in Cuba to throw all their prisoners on a boat and send them to South Florida, like they did under Carter.
Right, right. And I think part of it, too, is Biden being, 312 years old. he remembers those old lessons. They're like, wow, that really hurt Carter. We don't want that to happen again. But, boy, you just get out there giving moral support. Send your administration talking heads to give moral support to the Cuban people. And we could be done with a nuisance that has vexed America for 60 years. And, more importantly, the freedom of the Cuban people could finally be realized.
Well, and again, it's the hypocrisy is for obvious ends, but they need to be stated explicitly, which is people that are being oppressed by their government are only interesting to these Democrat politicians to the extent that their political persuasion is known. How are they going to vote if we en masse allow them to come to this country or en masse allow them to apply for asylum? We're happy to have people in here that will be state dependents and loyal constituents, but if it's a dicey proposition, then we don't want any part of it.
Absolutely. It's just raw political power that they're trying to attain. And that's why Biden's, doing things like bringing in refugees, as he calls them, across the southern border and just trying to export them to other states throughout the interior. They want a dependent voting bloc, and that's all they care about. They don't care about rescuing people from a tough situation in, say, Honduras. Instead, what they want is more power. That's all they seem to care about. It's really, frankly, comparing it to Cuba, it's just unpatriotic.
He is Jon Gabriel, editor-in-chief of Ricochet.com, contributor to AZCentral.com as well. John, thanks for joining us. As always, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan and Amy.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Making sure your aging loved ones are safe and sound is so important, especially in the COVID era. That's why there's Qualicare of Naperville, proudly serving the western suburbs. Qualicare of Naperville offers home care services suiting every need. They help mom and dad with daily household tasks, provide companionship, caregiver assistance, and healthcare assistance. Qualicare Home Services is now accepting new clients. Call to learn more about the Qualicare 360-degree care plan. Professional care from a local team in the safety of your loved one's home. Also serving retirement communities, hospitals, and rehab centers. That's Qualicare of Naperville, watching after the quality of life of your loved one each and every day. For more information, call 630-349-8282. Google search Qualicare of Naperville or visit their website directly at qualicare.com/Naperville-IL or call 630-349-8282. 630-349-8282.